case study. My name is Eric Robelan. I'm a reporter here at Education Week, and I will be moderating today's discussion. Our webinar is sponsored by Pearson. In addition, underwriting for the content of the webinar comes from the GE Foundation. With school districts around the country taking on the daunting task of implementing the Common Core, educators are looking far and wide for information, eager for ideas to help them succeed. Today I'm joined by two leaders in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District, Anne Clark and Rebecca Graf, who will share their early experiences with the Common Core and some promising strategies. They'll discuss their work in training principals and teachers, in developing an online repository of model student work, and they'll dive deeply into the writing dimension of the English language arts standards, among other things. Anne Clark is the Deputy Superintendent in the Charlotte school system. She's held a variety of teaching and administrative posts since joining the district in 1983. In fact, she served as a principal at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. Rebecca Graf, I'll call her Becky today, is the director of the Humanities department in the Charlotte district. She's been there since 2009. Her prior experience includes teaching high school English in Wisconsin and working as an educational consultant with districts in many states, including North Carolina, Wisconsin, Michigan, Florida, and Colorado, among others. As always, we want this webinar to be interactive, so send us your questions at any time during the hour. Simply type into the Ask a Question window on your webinar display. We'll address as many questions as we can. A couple of other quick points. Please check the audio setting on your computer as well as your speaker volume settings if you're having trouble hearing. And if you encounter other difficulties, try clicking the Help button. Also, an on-demand archive of today's presentation will be available online in the next 24 hours. Both the archive and a free downloadable version of the PowerPoint slides will be accessible at edweek.org. Now, let's begin our discussion. Again, I'd like to welcome Becky Graf and Anne Clark, who will make their joint presentation about the work they've been up to in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District. Go ahead, please.
Well, good afternoon, or good morning in some cases. We're delighted to be with you this afternoon to share our journey, and it is indeed a journey, around the implementation of the Common Core and the North Carolina Essential Standards. I want to start just by first saying that it's critically important as we thought about this work to identify a leadership team that would take on this work. That team is led by Becky Graf and another member of our curriculum instruction team, an elementary math specialist. And we have a cross-functional team of curriculum specialists, principals, assistant principals, teachers, zone superintendents that gather on a monthly basis to plan the next steps in implementation. And as a result of that task force, we feel we've had an extraordinary implementation. We've certainly had some bumps in the road, and we've learned a lot along the way, and we look forward to sharing that with our audience this afternoon. I think the key thing that we would want to share with you as we talk about our vision in Charlotte for the implementation of the Common Core is, of course, to share that our focus is on preparing our students to be successful with the new expectations. And our strategy has been one of building capacity, and building capacity at every level of the organization, which starts with our school board. We do a quarterly presentation to our school board, updating them on the Common Core, asking them to actually participate in training, do performance tasks so that they have a full appreciation of what our teachers and our students are being expected to do. In addition, we have district-wide training that has included our zone superintendents, our general principals, assistant principals, literacy facilitators, math facilitators, and teachers. So we're trying to build capacity to both lead and do the work of the Common Core at every level of the organization. And we've built that off a culture that we've established in the district for over 5 years of really having all the different leaders in our organization working in professional learning communities. So our zone superintendents, our principals, assistant principals, facilitators, and teachers regularly gather, and when I say regularly, on a weekly basis in professional learning communities, and we've used that as a platform to do our work. So our strategy last year was to take on Writing Standard 1 as a starting point. Now, some might question why we chose writing. We certainly want to be clear to our audience that reading is embedded in that work. As many of you know, we're already on this same journey. But we chose to focus as an entire district on W1 as a way to rally our entire district around that work and for us to all learn together on one standard. And the other critical thing that we felt was important for our principals and teachers to understand is the intersection of the Common Core, and specifically argumentation in W1, with the other key initiatives both going on locally and in our state. So the teacher evaluation, our PLC work, the North Carolina Essential Standards that were being developed in every grade and subject, and the Common Core. And we felt like argumentation allowed cut across all of those and certainly was evident K-12. So that was our thinking as we thought about this first year of implementation, which was actually the 2010-11 school year.
Once we decided that we wanted to start with argumentation, we knew that we had to have something to drive our work, and so we made a SMART goal that all students would apply the writing skills defined by W1 at their particular grade level. And we chose to use a modification from the Literacy Design Collaborative, and so we had teacher tasks developed in all grade levels and in all content areas. We asked each PLC and each teacher to design and implement a W1 or an argumentation task, and what they had to do after reading this particular picture book or after reading these 3 articles, write an essay or write a brochure or write a pamphlet. So they had to come up with a W1 task and implement that task. Then in their PLCs, they had to analyze the student work and decide which samples they felt exceeded the standard, which samples met the standard, and which samples were approaching the standard. And one of the most exciting things that we did, we asked the teachers to upload that work, and so we have a repository now of many, many work samples, both from teachers and from students. Underlying this work, even though we were asking them to work on a task, we had a deeper set of objectives that we were looking at the district level. We wanted them to deepen their understanding of the Common Core. We provided professional development on the shifts that were occurring, that we're seeing in the Common Core with literacy and with mathematics. We wanted to continue our work with PLCs. That's an ongoing initiative. And we also wanted them applying unpacking strategies. We had them working with building trajectories, K-12 trajectories, and also working with their new essential standards. The other thing, obviously, they have to be able to design the tasks and instruction that's aligned with the Common Core. So just in summary, again, we were looking at those 4 things with argumentation because argumentation was a brand new skill for everybody. It gave us all a common starting point, a place that we could focus our PD. But even more importantly, we wanted them to take all of those objectives and be able to apply those to any standard at all. So not only were they learning those 4 things in regards to W1, we were hoping and basing our work this year on transferring those skills to other areas. In May of this past year, in 2012, we were delighted that we have collected over 1,600 tasks that are written by teachers, and aligned with those tasks, we have 4,800 or over 4,800 student work samples. So we had a SharePoint site that teachers uploaded the tasks, the rubric, and then the 3 samples that they felt were above, at, and below the standard. And so now we, as a central office, have a jumping off point to decide, where we are for our next steps with professional development and where we need to go with our teachers as well. That leads us to this year, so we're expanding. We're using those same 4 objectives, things that we wanted to have everybody focused on, but now we have added the dimension of analyzing our student work to reflect on our practice and adjust our instruction. So where are we in terms of collected. We then added for this next year power standard. We've identified 4 in our district that we want to use as a focus. Not that the others aren't important, but we're using these 4 to leverage our work for this year. We've added writing standard 2. We're continuing our work with writing standard 1, and then we're also adding reading standard 1 and reading standard 10. We're almost looking at those as the sidebars on a ladder, and the other reading standards are the individual rungs. Our 1 and our 10 are important for us to leverage our reading standards. This next slide, for those of you that need a little bit of review, you could certainly go back, and it's the language from the Common Core that shares exactly what those standards entail. Our new district SMART goal for this year, then, will be continuing again our work on W1, argumentation, but we're adding that we want our students to be working with informative writing as well, writing standard number 2, and then they're working with reading tasks, close reading in a lot of different settings, R1 and R10. We're dividing that workload. Instead of having every teacher be involved with all of those standards, we're moving slowly to move forward, and we're sharing the load. For example, English language arts and literacy are focusing on the reading standards, and social studies, science, and other content areas are focusing on adding W2, so the students receive or will be experiencing all of the standards, but the teachers are sharing that workload. And again, we've added this 5th objective where we're really looking at analyzing the student work and collecting those work samples. We know that we want them to transfer all of these skills to other standards, so we're focusing our PD on 4 power standards, but in their PLCs and in their alliance meetings, teachers are working on building those same objectives and the same things that we're modeling in our meetings on their other content area standards. This year, at the end of the school year, starting in the spring, not only will they be resubmitting new W1 or argumentation samples, we'll also be collecting work samples, student work samples from the informative or explanatory writing. We'll be collecting some of the work samples from the reading standards, and I know that in our math program, they're going to be looking at the standards of mathematical practices, work samples from students that demonstrate moving forward with some of those standards, and I believe the teachers in several of our other content areas are also adding to the SharePoint site so teachers can upload work samples. It's an exciting place to be, that we have this place where they can share their work. I want to also point out that it's not that we're focusing entirely on the literacy standards. We are doing substantial work with the standards of mathematical practices. We're talking significantly about the shifts in math that are necessary because of the Common Core, the shifts that we're seeing in literacy. And again, in North Carolina, nearly every content area this year has new content standards as well. So we're on new ground in a lot of places. It's an exciting time for us in our district.
I want to spend just a minute talking about support. Oftentimes I think that's a conversation districts don't have. It's not, they get so focused in jumping into the content and looking at standards and unpacking those standards. North Carolina benefited from legislative action that actually designated 5 Common Core training days in both the 2011-12 school year and our current school year. So we actually have legislative days that are dedicated to teacher training on the Common Core, which is, those district leaders that are on the line know, is absolutely a huge gift to have had 10 days over the 2 years completely focused around the implementation of the Common Core. In addition, we've had district-level principal meetings where Becky and the team focus with our principals on getting them ready and comfortable to lead this work in the district. We made a bold decision in Charlotte that indeed our principals were going to lead this. We were not going to be pulling teachers out of the building for the work days. These 5 days each year were going to be based at the building with those singleton teachers like a media specialist or a band teacher being pulled out so that they had a PLC that they could work with as they explored the implications of the Common Core. We then met by level in principal meetings, elementary, middle, high. So again, the principals could get in their PLCs and talk about their strategy and how they were going to think about implementing this training back at their school. And Becky and the team actually modeled for the principals the training that they were going to be expected to do back in the building. And in addition, the entire curriculum and instruction team was given that same training so they could be a support team at the school with the principals. And finally, prior to this training at the schoolhouse, our principals met in their zones with their supervisor to do one final review and troubleshooting before the principals actually got before teachers and implemented this training. And then we've used our principal leadership conference that we have each summer for a week to make Common Core the foundational piece of that entire conference. So as I mentioned earlier in our conversation, our strategy has been one of building capacity at all levels of the organization with our greatest focus on that of our principals. And so you've seen the tiered level of support that we've given our principals through these 5 Common Core waiver days. We're in preparation for those through principals meetings, general principals meetings, level meetings, zone meetings, and then one-on-one support from the curriculum instruction team or side-by-side teaching if necessary for principals that were not comfortable, and we certainly had a few. We paired them with either another principal or a member of the curriculum instruction team so that they were still managing and leading that work, but they had somebody there co-facilitating and supporting in the work. We wanted our principals to be successful, and we knew they were all not going to arrive at the destination in the same way and fashion. It came with different levels of confidence and skill in this training. So we continue offering different modules of opportunities for our principals to continue to work. We front-loaded the Common Core days at the beginning of this school year. Last year they were spread throughout the school year because the state of North Carolina will be testing on the Common Core at the end of this school year. And so we knew we needed to give our teachers as much information up front and then continue to support in their alliance meetings and their grade level meetings and their subject area meetings that we have in the district on a monthly basis. We've also organized a website just for principals. It's called Principal on Demand, which is a location where our principals can go for all of the resources, not just for the Common Core, but we have a special section on that website where they can access handouts, PowerPoint, resources, look at old webinar content. It's just been an amazing resource, and they contribute to material that we put on that website, so it is a continual work in progress and under construction, as we like to call it, at all times. And then in terms of what that school year support looks like, we build off our infrastructure of working in professional learning communities. And we have job-alike meetings, we have book studies, we have facilitator meetings, we have department chair meetings. Many of the things that districts across the country have is just leveraging those as a way to build your capacity as a district. So we'll stop there and invite questions.
Great. Well, thanks for the great presentation. Now, before we move to the Q&A portion of our webinar, we'll take a moment to hear from our sponsor, Pearson.
Hi, I'm Claire Hollenbeck from Pearson School Achievement Services. I'm involved in the product development of our professional development services for pre-K through 12 teachers. Welcome to this Pearson-sponsored Ed Week webinar. Now, webinars on the Common Core have become really popular in the past year, and that's because the Common Core is arguably the most important shift in American education of the last century, and it deserves wide attention. But most webinars have dealt with the why and the what of Common Core, not the how. Today's webinar is different. It's a case study into how one district began the shift toward the Common Core. This focus on the how of the Common Core is exactly the way we'll be approaching Pearson's new 20-session topics there will focus on how teachers can change their classroom instructional practices to develop the kind of student academic behaviors that lead to college and career readiness. Pearson's full array of Common Core services can help you to develop those necessary changes in classroom practice. Behind this image sit more than 70 Common Core focused workshops and services. Just getting started? We can help you with the fundamentals or work with you to build out a comprehensive implementation plan. Ready to dig deeper? We can diagnose where you are and provide services which help you measure real student understanding and monitor the change of practice in the classroom. Our delivery models are flexible. We've got face-to-face, virtual, and train-the-trainer, all to help you build capacity. We'd love to talk with you about your needs and about how Pearson can partner with you to craft meaningful solutions. Just contact us at the number you see here.
Okay. So now we're going to turn to the Q&A portion of our presentation today. And I'm going to start with a question that maybe this one would be good for you, Anne, to take on, which is I was intrigued by this notion of what you call power standards. It sounds like sort of maybe one way to kind of get your arms around this and maybe make it not feel so overwhelming. And I'm guessing that some of the district folks in our audience might be intrigued by this too. Could you say a little bit more about the decision to do that and how you identified those power standards and how that relates to the rest of the work you're doing?
Well, I think when you get your notebook and it has the complete set of Common Core standards and the appendices attached, it's a bit overwhelming. And because we had the benefit of an opportunity to stage this, we weren't in a situation where we had to do a full implementation. We actually had the gift of a year and the days. We felt like we wanted to start with the W1 and W2, and those particularly being the more challenging ones. And then, as Becky said, we wanted to use R1 and R10 as those sides to the ladder, the strong critical pieces needed on either side to hold those rungs together, as just a way to approach this that wasn't just trying to take on the entire waterfront and to build.
I'd like to add to that by starting with a task, and again going back to the work done with the Literacy Design Collaborative, a well-designed task embeds many standards inside that one task. And so we knew that teachers and students would be comfortable saying, oh, I can do a task where I have to read this and write a short paragraph about what I've read, and it's dealing with the standard of argumentation. But embedded in that single task, I have at least 7 or 8 standards. I've got the writing argumentation standard, number 1, but I also have a reading standard of close reading, and if I have students reading multiple texts, I hit the reading standard number 9, where they're having to compare different texts and synthesize that information. I also have, if I include graphs and tables, I have reading standard, I believe it's number 7, and so they're hitting multiple kinds of text. And so by choosing a power standard, we're able to leverage many other standards at the same time and not overwhelm our teachers in their implementation.
Great. I'm glad you mentioned, again, the tasks, because we got a number of questions around that. I'm posting one up on the screen now, but I'm going to make it a little broader first. I bet you a lot of people are curious. Could you give a couple of specific examples of what tasks your teachers have submitted and what they look like?
We collected over 1,600. So they're from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, and they're in every content area. Teachers unpacked that W1, that argumentation standard, and so depending on the grade level, you have to go into the grade level specific standards to see exactly what they were driving towards. So let me give you a couple of specific examples. We had one elementary art teacher that had her students make different prints, and so the student had a number of different prints that they were with an art project, and that's meeting their art essential standards. Well, we added the element then of argumentation, so the student had to choose which art print was the best in the student's eyes, and in a short paragraph, using art vocabulary, they had to defend their choice of which art print was the best. So we have an example from an art class. We have what you would expect, from an English class or a social studies class, document-based questions, essays where students were doing literary analysis. We also had as simple in a kindergarten classroom where they had been reading lots and lots of books about friendship, and they had to decide which character would be the best friend, and then they wrote a sentence or two about friendship. So depending on the actual grade level standards, that impacted what teachers chose as a task. We also knew that this was a beginning level baby step that we were making, and so we knew that we were going to collect a wide range of tasks in terms of complexity, and we would collect a wide range of student samples, and we knew we needed those samples to drive our work for this year as we start to calibrate, well, what does W1 look like in third grade in CMS, no matter what you're building? What does W1 look like in science in ninth grade? And now we can start having those conversations because we have a bank of work samples to drive our work.
Thank you. Next question, again, is one where there's a question out there more about the writing task, and it's this broader issue, which is, and I think you did articulate in your presentation, that these expectations, for example, around writing are not just for the English teacher, but for all of the teachers across the school. So someone was saying, I think they were kind of saying, really? All the teachers? And then, to follow up with that, can you say a little bit about how you've done that, especially with these other disciplines like science, social studies? I know you mentioned before art. I'm actually kind of intrigued by this myself because I'm also aware and working on a story soon about the dimension of the English language art standards that talk about literacy through science and social studies. So there's even a sort of an explicit dimension of the standards that talks about that. But maybe you could say a little bit more about your strategies for helping these other teachers build this into their instruction.
Well, first of all, just to clarify, all does mean all in CMS. This was an expectation of every single teacher in our district, regardless of discipline, content, or grade level. And it's one of the reasons we chose W1, because we felt like writing arguments cut across all subjects, contents, and disciplines. And although a challenging one to take on, was one that we knew played well kindergarten to 12th grade.
I would also say that the Common Core standards aren't just ELA standards. They are literacy standards for history, social studies, science, and technical subjects. And in the standards of mathematical practices, I believe Standard 3 deals with communicating and looking at the reasoning and following the arguments of others. And so there's definitely an overlap with our math friends as well. And having students write about their content and defending their claims about their content raises achievement for everybody. It's a universal standard that we can use as a base for everyone.
Thanks. This is maybe more a question for state officials, but I'll go ahead and ask if you're aware, building on this topic, you mentioned, I believe, Anne, you mentioned this in the presentation, that the state at the same time has recently revised pretty much all of its standards across content areas, so schools have their hands full. Are you aware whether there was any deliberate alignment between the Common Core and some of these other subjects like science or social studies?
Absolutely, and we've tried to be very intentional and consistent in our message for our teachers not to see these as separate, but as connected. So whenever we talk about the Common Core, we've been very careful to say Common Core and North Carolina Essential Standards. On any document that you will see, we try to be really clear to our teachers that these aren't to be viewed as separate. They're supporting each other and aligned, and our state was very intentional in that design.
Okay. I know you've had a number of days of professional development with them just recently, and they're now maybe in the early days of this school year. What you're hearing from them, first off, and then this question, about the experience so far, and then this question of what advice you give teachers who feel overwhelmed by this whole task.
Well, certainly I would just say that teachers don't work in isolation in Charlotte. We have an expectation that teachers gather in professional learning communities on a weekly basis at a minimum. So no teacher should find himself or herself in isolation. We did think thoughtfully about our new teacher orientation this year because we knew we had close to 700 teachers coming into the district that were not a part of our year-long training effort last year. And we wanted to think about how it is that we catch them up and then allow them to be engaged in the training for this year. So I think there are also a lot of the support structures that I talked about. We have alliance meetings where teachers come out on a monthly basis. We have lead teachers. We have department chair meetings. We have literacy facilitators in all of our elementary schools, math facilitators in most of our elementary schools. So we've got lead teachers that are a part of that team that is leading this effort. So again, the principal is not alone in his or her building trying to take this on. They've got a strong nucleus of lead teachers there to support them in that implementation. But I think our teachers would be more overwhelmed if we didn't have that professional learning community structure with the way we do business and the way we have been doing business for 3 or 4 years.
Additionally, I would add we've got a lot of technology support in that we have wikis and the SharePoint site where we're asking teachers to upload their work. That's open for anyone in the district, and they can go online and sort by grade level. They can sort by content area and are able to share the thinking of teachers across the district.
Wondering if you might also just share a little bit about maybe a few examples of what teachers seem to be liking best about the new standards and maybe some of the areas where they have the deepest misgivings or fear or what have you.
I think the teachers have become excited when they see the kinds of tasks and questions that our students are going to be asked, and it reminds them of how their teaching has to change. And although I think there's a tendency to be overwhelmed, I guess I'm hearing more excitement and energy around the type of teaching, the kinds of assignments students are being given in class, and that shift we're making. And we are in a shift. We haven't arrived at a destination. We don't have all of our teachers by any means comfortable and where they need to be. So I don't want anyone to leave this conversation with that idea. But I don't have an overwhelming number of principals coming my way saying my teachers are struggling, they're frustrated, they're not excited about this. I don't have people that are embracing this. The principals are hungry for the tools and the strategies and the content that will allow them to support their teachers. But we have an infrastructure in place in the district to support this. We didn't have to create that, so we could build on that infrastructure and not have to start by figuring out how we were going to organize this, because we did have systems and processes in place that we have used for other capacity building professional development in the past. So it was a well-oiled machine in terms of process, and that made it less overwhelming for our school-based folks.
Next question, and this maybe is a little loaded of what, frankly, full implementation means. Someone asked, what is your timeline for full implementation of the standards? Is it now K-12 in Charlotte, and would you consider this a year of full implementation or still sort of easing your way in to the implementation?
We are we're considered full implementation this year. Our state tests are based on the Common Core and essential standards for North Carolina. I would say that we are growing in our understanding of what implementation means and what these shifts mean for all of us. I think we're looking toward 2014 and 2015 when the Smarter Balance and PARC assessments go live, and that will create a different lens that we'll be able to view our work, but we are in full implementation right now.
I would just add that we are a race to the top state. So our state is working and has put in place additional assessments beyond the traditional state testing that we've had in place for 2 decades. So we are actually on track to have an assessment in every grade and subject in our state as a result of our commitments we made in Race to the Top. And we're phasing those assessments in the non-tested grades and subjects. We're implementing close to 35 tests this year in elementary and middle school science and social studies, and in 22 high school subject areas that have traditionally not been tested. So we're moving full steam ahead, and certainly this is still a learning year, even if we call it a full implementation year. We've had 1 year of training. We would by no means say that we have the capacity built to a place that we're just in business as usual. We are learning every day, and Becky and I and the team try to stay about 6 hours ahead of our teachers and their questions. We're pressing hard.
You mentioned the Race to the Top, and you are right, one of the states that won one of the federal grants. Has that been pretty important to sort of giving you maybe a leg up over some other places in terms of what it's enabled you to do?
Well, I certainly think our state has helped us by legislating 5 Common Core days for last school year and this school year. That was a tremendous gift, and I think it's sent a strong signal to schools across the state. You know, hey, this is serious, this is for real, and it's going to happen. And by the way, we're going to start testing on the Common Core in June of 2012. So I think it was a cold splash of water just to say, you know, let's get in.
Here's sort of a philosophical question that we have, which is on this issue of if everyone in the country is unpacking the standards and determining what they mean for themselves, how can it be common when everyone is sort of mining their own interpretation? You know, maybe that sort of speaks to sort of, you know, how much these standards really guide what you do and how much it's still up to state schools and districts to interpret that.
I really like this question, and I think of it like an accordion, and that we drill in and then we come back out, and so we have a national set of standards that are out there that we're all looking at, and now we're all diving in and we're unpacking and we're trying to figure out what it means. But because of the social media and the internet and all of the resources that are live and viral, we have the ability then to accordion back out and double check. Well, if what I'm doing in North Carolina, how does that align with what's going on in Colorado, or what does that look like in Wisconsin? And we're able to double check ourselves, and so we're in a place where it is common, and there are conversations going on across state lines and across classrooms in ways that we haven't ever been able to do before, and it is pretty exciting. And I think that as more and more resources become available and are shared across the country, we will have a common understanding of what we expect our children to be able to do and what we expect them to know in regards to all of the kinds of learning that they're expected.
I'm going to drill down for a minute into the writing piece of this, because we had a question that would give you an opportunity to do that, which is around what you find to be the best techniques to teach essay writing, and have you implemented certain writing programs to do that? I wonder if you could take a stab at that for us, to tell us what you're doing.
Well, obviously, we feel real strongly about process writing, that there's pre-writing, and students have time to plan and think about what it is that they want to put on paper, and then they have time to produce or do the drafting and editing. We don't have a particular writing program that leads us through that process, but we follow the standard writing process.
Next question, you know, a lot of people are concerned about finding appropriate textbooks and other curricular materials that are aligned to the standards, and frankly, we hear a lot that there may not be much out there. How are you trying to go about evaluating claims of alignment and then identifying the materials that you're going to use in your district?
We have a process that we already utilize in our district anytime we have curriculum materials or contact by a vendor with a particular curriculum product. We have a cross-functional team of curriculum specialists that meet for a full day every other month, and we allow vendors to make a presentation to our cross-functional team representing all curriculum areas. And so we've added the lens of the Common Core and the North Carolina Essential Standards as a part of that evaluation. And so we have our curriculum experts sitting in the room to ask the right set of questions so that we get that validated with many different people looking at that. So we've had that process in place for 3 years, and so we have just continued that process. And since our curriculum instruction team is fully trained and a part of the district training team, they're well versed to ask those tough questions and to make their own assessments of various tools and products that are being advanced as aligned to the Common Core. And certainly the person who asked the question is correct, because I think we do have those claims being made on curriculum products. I feel like there's a hovercraft over my office with people making that claim. So I think it is critically important for districts to develop a process where many eyes are looking at particular products in terms of their value and their helpfulness to teachers and students.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's also challenging for maybe districts that don't have sort of the level of resources and expertise that a district like yours, a larger one, would have. Do you have an impression at this point as to the extent to which there is material out there that really is well aligned? Do you think that there's still a long way to go?
I think we all have a long way to go in understanding what these standards are, and it's going to take us a little bit to get there.
One question that we've gotten a few variations on has to do with teacher evaluations and how they're connected to the Common Core. Could you talk a little bit about that in your district? Has that involved some shifts too?
We actually have a new teacher evaluation instrument that's just been in implementation for 3 years. And many of the practices and strategies that a teacher would be expected to demonstrate to be an accomplished or distinguished teacher on our evaluation rubric map beautifully to the types of activities and tasks that we would be expecting our students to be able to do. So, for example, rigor of the student work product is a part of our teacher evaluation rubric. That aligns magnificently with the kinds of tasks and writing that our students are going to be expected to do as a part of the Common Core. So we see that alignment there, and that good teaching practice obviously moves us forward in terms of our students being ready and able to perform well with these standards.
There's also a question about teacher preparation and whether your district has worked with any higher education partners to help ensure that the teachers who, and it sounds like you've been hiring a lot of new teachers, whether you've been working to sort of ensure the pipeline brings you teachers who are going to be ready to do this work.
We have strong partnerships with area universities. Our primary focus in recent years has been around principal preparation and redesign of principal certification programs, but we are shifting that focus to exactly the question that's being asked, because we realize the need to have our teachers coming out of the door into public education ready to have a full understanding of the Common Core and to have that embedded, obviously, as a part of their student teaching and practicum experiences along the way. So we are shifting our focus in our partnerships to teacher preparation, but tactically made an initial strategy to focus on principal preparation.
One area that we have not discussed today, I believe, is parent role in all of this. And there was a question about materials that you may have created to help parents understand that. I'll broaden that just to say, what has been your district's approach to help parents in the broader community understand these new standards and the changes that are coming, frankly, even to parents who may have 2 children or even 1 child who, 2 years ago was focused on one set of standards and now a new set?
That's a great question. We have the benefit of something called Parent University in our district, which is a team of folks that are dedicated to engaging our parents in their own professional development, if you will, as parents. And so Becky and her team have done a nice job of getting some initial videos available for parents to both view in a face-to-face facilitated session as well as to go online and just get that initial understanding of what is this Common Core that I'm hearing about. Prior to this webinar, Becky and I spent some time talking about this next phase of the broader community because we know we need and are getting calls from the business community and community boards asking if we'll come and talk to them about the Common Core. So we're in the process of developing a presentation that we can take out into the community beyond the parent audience. In addition, our board meetings are televised, and we've done actual Common Core training activities with our school board, actually had them write tasks, examine tasks, look at a rubric and score student response so that our own board members are actually modeling for the community what the expectations are going to be for our students. And we will continue to do those sessions with our school board. We've gotten great feedback both from the TV audience watching as well as from our 9 board members that this is of great value.
I was just yesterday writing about some efforts to help inform parents and communities about the Common Core, and I saw where one state had developed a number of resources, including sort of the elevator speech, if you will, that you give to a parent about the Common Core. What's sort of your elevator speech, Anne, for the community about what this is and why you're doing it?
I think because of the fact that we're a race to the top state and we've been on a very fast train moving out of the station on a variety of fronts, my message probably hasn't been an elevator speech about the Common Core and what it is as much as what it isn't and what it is to be excited about in terms of the Common Core, what it actually means for the student experience in the classroom. While some of the materials we were preparing actually get into what Common Core is, our district message has been one of enthusiasm, and at the end of the day, what does the experience in the classroom, how will that be different? Because the expectations are different, the standards are different, the kind of work product the student is going to be expected to produce are going to be different, and that we obviously are trying to position our students to be very successful when the assessment comes our way in a couple of years.
Thanks. We always get a few questions in these Common Core webinars around special populations, including English language learners. I'm wondering if one or both of you could tackle a little bit both of how teachers are prepared for teaching the Common Core to English language learners and also any other strategies to help bring that work to fruition.
Certainly, our English language learner team as well as our special ed team have been active participants as a part of our district team, our strategy team charged with the implementation. But in our mind, this doesn't change the way we think about those students, even the expectations that we have for those students. We've spent the last 6 to 8 years providing all of our teachers with the strategies to work with our English language learners. We've used the sheltered instruction observation protocol, SIOP as it's often fondly called, and really an expectation that all of our teachers will have taken that training. In addition, we are an inclusive practices district for special needs students, and therefore, we have our special needs teachers in the classroom with the regular ed teacher teaching as a teaching pair, co-teaching. So we're excited about the Common Core as a platform for that kind of instruction to continue and don't see a need to make dramatic shifts for those 2 student populations.
Okay. I really like this next question from someone in the audience. It's about observing teachers in the classroom, and what will administrators specifically be looking for in classroom observations that will indicate that teachers really are focused on mastery of the standards?
I'll take a first crack at this and then turn it over to Becky, but I think we've made a shift as a district to focusing on the student work product and the quality of that student work product, because we realized that was a significant weakness we had as a district in terms of the rigor of that student work product, and we've designed walkthrough documents and rubrics to give teachers and principals feedback about that. So the Common Core just reinforces the importance of the focus that we've had for the last couple of years. So for me, it's not so much looking at the teacher when I walk in the classroom to be able to make an assessment around Common Core implementation. I'm going to be able to see that when I look at the student work product.
I think we're also making a shift toward having students have lots of different kinds of discourse about their content. So if they're not writing about their content, they're talking about, they're discussing, they're debating, they're defending, and so when principals walk into classrooms, we would expect to see students interacting in a different kind of way with the content. One of our math specialists, and I really like how she's worded this, if a student can't communicate their content, it's not their content. So the person in the classroom that's sharing the knowledge can't just be the teacher. We have to have our students talking about the content using the language of the discipline, and we would expect to see that as a shift in our classrooms.
The next one is a fairly broad question, but it gives you an opportunity to sort of weigh in on what you would identify as one or heck even two of the biggest challenges you've faced so far in implementation, and whether you feel like you've had the resources to deal with them.
I think despite having an immensely talented central office team,